podcast. I'm your host, Jim, and joining me today at TVH Group head offices, as well as the New Money Mindset Mastery studio.
work in progress studio.
But joining me is my co-host, Ryan. Ryan, how are things?
I swear it's October, but with the weather going on right now, I don't know. But something is heating up with the conversation that we've started a few podcasts ago, and I'm pretty sure this was going to cause a lot of heat when it comes to understanding what's going on in people's lives, especially for us 40, 50-year-olds that are looking at their parents' generation of passing on, and the discussion that just really isn't happening amongst a lot of institutions, I will say, to put it narrowly.
Well, I thought about that actually. It's not just institutions, but there's another culprit here too that we haven't talked about. It's the accountants, and we're going to talk about that later. And sorry, Dave, my business partner, who is our accountant, but he knows better.
Yeah.
But yeah, accountants are another culprit as well. Going to places like, tax reporting places. People go every year to the same type of companies. And anyways, we're going to talk about that. But I think we're going to get right into this, and we're talking about a family who lost about $660,000, not by way of a scam or a fraud, although some people might consider it to be a scam or a fraud, but to taxes, right? And all because parents passed away and they had a lot of money. I would say in some places that maybe they didn't think there would be this major tax impact. So I'm going to start playing this clip that's on YouTube. And let's see here, share the audio and let's listen up.
Parents as hard workers who saved to buy a cottage in 1998 and always put money away in their RRSPs for their retirement. 5 years ago, they sold their home and made the cottage their principal residence. When they both died last year, Gallia's mother's RRSP rolled into her father's for a total of $715,000. When her father died, the RRSP had to be taxed as income at about 50%, and there was capital gains on the cottage. The family had a tax bill of $659,000.
It made me more angry than anything. We've just lost both of our parents inside of 11 months.
Gallia says to avoid selling the cottage, almost the entire amount of RRSPs her parents saved had to go to pay the tax bill. She says she and her brother expected some of the funds and were shocked almost nothing was left over.
What happens to the RRSP? Maybe there's a better vessel to put that in so that it does pass on to your kids or who you'd like it to pass to.
If you want to do some retirement income planning for tax efficiency, at least by the age of 55 or 60.
Tax expert Evelyn Jack says families should adopt a strategy to reduce the amount of tax they pay, use life insurance, and get advice from a professional to avoid a massive tax bill when a loved one passes.
Take a tax hit earlier on so they can avoid a top marginal tax rate at death. And in the process, put that money into more tax efficient vehicles, for example, a TFSA.
Gallia says she's still grieving the loss of her parents, but wanted to share what happened to her family to help others.
Other people learn that maybe RRSPs aren't the best option for them, then at least I've done something to be helpful or beneficial, and I think my parents would be proud of me for that.
Gallia describes her parents as hard.
So I find this very frustrating.
Yep.
And the reason why I find this very frustrating, and Ron, when you joined me even a couple of years ago, that I've talked about people who overload themselves in a certain type of registered account. Never had we said that people should not be investing in that type of account. We're referring to RSPs. But the problem is that people have been so conditioned to contribute as much of their money into an RSP, pay down a mortgage. That's been kind of like the recommended strategy by the banks and accountants, right? And neighbors and friends and family. But they don't anticipate what just happened to this family. Now, what I will say is this. Had the death occurred between the parents 1 year after, so the first year the one parent passed away, the second one passed away the year after, it'd still be a similar tax situation, right? Had it been where the second parent lived for another 10, 15 years, maybe things would have been different. The fact is, part of the major impact here is the timing of when they unfortunately both passed away. It all happened within the same calendar year, right? But I know when you came from the other institution that you were with, my guess is they probably said, sell as much RSPs as you possibly can, right? Am I wrong in saying that?
For the most part, it was one way was the best way for retirement instead of kind of a layering strategy that we usually introduce to clients depending on their outcome that they want to. And just kind of like you, is that you always knew in the back of your head that there's always a better way. There's a different way of doing things.
Yeah.
And then the outcome that is kind of cookie cutter for a lot of clients in many other areas is that this is the only way to do things. And, we've talked about it. This is a joint account with the government. The outcome, what people think the outcome is going to be. And of course, some people's attitude could be, well, I'm gone, so it's not my problem anymore. But it's something for us as the younger generation to start thinking about and talking about with our parents to say, what do you want the outcome to be? Right? You've worked hard. Do you want it just to go back to the government, or do you want to try to stick it to the man and try to save as much as possible and potentially pass on to your family? So
Yeah, and I think when I look at Gallia's parents and their situation, which is common with a lot of people that we work with, right? Hard workers. They thought they were doing the right thing by saving, every little penny that they could, so they can enjoy, a comfortable retirement. They also had a cottage that they wanted to leave to the family. Again, they did all the right things in terms of how we should be living life, right? Work hard, save, have a little bit, left over for the kids. And unfortunately, that strategy backfired on them, right? And what I will say is, in all the years that I've been in this industry, and it's been 36 years, whenever I've made the recommendation to maybe restructure things in a certain way, and I'd always get pushback. Not always, but a lot of times I get pushback because, again, it was against the grain, right, in terms of what my recommendations were. And then there was a death of usually the second parent. And then all of a sudden, the client child would come to me and say, well, my dad had $300,000 in his RIF and half of it's going to CRA. That's what we warned against.
Yeah.
Right. And at that moment, then they're coming to me saying, well, we need to stop this whole RSP contribution thing, take all my money out of the RSPs. And we're, whoa, you don't want to also create your own tax explosion now. Right. But let's kind of restructure things. Right. So this is common in terms of finding out the tax bill. Right. And they always find out after the fact, even though we talked to them about preparing for this and restructuring things, right? And you've come across this all the time too.
Yeah, and again, the tools that we use help people understand what the end game will be for them. So we provide what the big red marked number is going to be and how that will impact their family and their generation, the legacy that they're trying to leave. Because again, it's unfortunate, the family passed away so soon. It unfortunately happens. Our industry is stuck with sharing the bad news and at the same time trying to help people along the way.
Yeah.
And that's the importance of getting that secondary. If you're currently putting all your money in RSPs because you want to save the tax right now, there's a conversation that needs to happen as to what your longer term goal is. And if you want to leave a legacy for your family, for a charity, you might be narrowing what you're leaving. You're going to definitely reduce the amount that you're going to leave to the next generation, and especially this generation right now, which is some of the largest the largest amount of money coming through the pipeline, which I'm sure the government is just licking their chops at right now. It's going to fund our OAS and things like that going forward. So, but if you want to take steps to ensure that we deconstruct the problem, which is partially the RSP and the inheritance trap that we're looking at for a lot of people right now. Sit down and talk with us. Have your family be involved in the overall planning of how things are going to happen upon each passing. And our program right away shows people kind of in black and red what that will look like. And I think what often happens with people later on in life is when it comes to us maybe using life insurance as a potential strategy, you're 10 or 20 years older, or perhaps you've come down with a health concern that is eliminating or reducing our ability to kind of help the overall end goal. So I encourage people to start early and often, because you don't think it's going to be a retirement problem or after death problem, but it's our problem right now that we're trying to remedy and fix for a lot of clients. So
yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the life insurance part of it, but when we just going back to the story itself, they didn't lose everything. So I just want to make that clear as well. What they did lose was all the liquid investment in the RSP, because what had happened was there was the capital gains from the cottage. They wanted to maintain the cottage. So in order to pay the tax bill, because CRA is not going to wait, there were a couple of options. Either they had to sell off the cottage, right, to get the money to pay off the tax bill, which they didn't want to do, or they had to redeem, they were forced to redeem the RSPs anyway. Whatever they were left with, they had to use that to go ahead and pay off the tax bill, right? But there's going to be a bit of a double whammy here for them, because if that cottage is now, the new cost base is the day of death. So now they've inherited the cottage, meaning the brother and sister. Now let's say they have children, and now that's their recreational cottage. Well, in the future, at some point, guess what's going to happen? They're going to pass away, and it's going to be taxed again, right, on the capital gain side of things. So people have to recognize that you can't avoid it. I have clients calling me, wanting to meet, saying, "Hey, I want to know a better way of doing this to avoid tax." You can't avoid tax. It's you can potentially do things like own the cottage in a trust, right? And if various beneficiaries pass away, it doesn't really trigger much. It's all within the trust, but at some point there's going to be a tax bill to pay down the road regardless. But yeah, putting all the money in the RSPs and passing away on the second death where you don't have a surviving spouse. It's amazing how many clients we sit down and we ask them, do they know what happens to the RSP at death? And many of them are like, either they respond with, I have no idea, or yeah, my kids are going to get tax free.
Yeah.
It's like, no. Right. So then where does life insurance come into play? If I use this as the example, they had, what was the tax bill? Tax bill $659,000. So if they had, the second parent, so you can do what's called a joint last to die policy. So what that means is the policy doesn't pay out until the second death. In this case is where you'd probably use a joint last to die policy. And they had a joint last to die policy for $660,000. What that would have meant was when the second parent passed away, the beneficiaries would have received $660,000 tax-free to pay the tax bill, right? And then the argument is, well, life insurance is expensive. Well, I think this is more expensive because, and I've said this many times with you in examples, it's cheaper to use the insurance company's money than it is your own, right? Because even if over the lifetime of the policy, the person paid $300,000 in premiums, they paid $300,000 to get $660,000. It's still cheaper than to have to come up with the $660 of your own money, right? And that's some of the planning that we do, but the banks don't talk about it, right? But these are some of the strategies that we implement.
And I think that one of the things that, the daughter kind of touched upon very briefly is, you're going through all this very emotional time, and you're dealing with 10 different things all at once.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I see most often when, unfortunately, you have to do a payout of the debt is that how easy it can be to suddenly have that money to help hire somebody or take care of the tax bill at the end, hire somebody to do the final taxes. It's all the executive work that has to go into it is something that often isn't talked about and people don't realize. And more recently, even talking with a few clients, in their 80s too, it's like, have you talked to the executor? I know this is going off track a little bit, but have you talked to the executor of what their duties are? Because sometimes people don't mention what it is. So all the emotional state that's going on during this, plus you're slapped with a tax bill of $659,000. That's an awful lot to take on for somebody. So again, proper planning, making sure that all people involved in the planning are involved in the planning and the execution afterwards to make everything much smoother. It goes back to our cash flow solutions. It goes back to our coaching, which is financial literacy, making sure that everybody's involved and talking about these very uncomfortable things more often to make sure that that everything's kind of executed. Everybody understands their role throughout. And yeah, I think that's one of the big things that I've noticed with a few clients more recently. So.
Yep. And going back to who's at fault or to blame for some of this, it's not really blame or fault, but what it really is the banks again encourage the RSP deposits. And then what happens at tax time? You sit down with your accountant and you're looking at minimizing your tax bill for that year. And what does the accountant say? Well, put money into your RSP and you'll get X amount back. Because the accountant's not concerned about what's going to happen 20 years from now. They're concerned about this year, right? Because I've had a lot of clients say, well, my accountant keeps saying RSPs. Like, yeah, because you're asking about paying less tax. You're paying less tax this year. You're just creating a bigger problem for yourself. You're deferring the problem, right? So I would say if you're looking for advice, not just for your tax year, but also in the future on how to avoid CRA getting all your money, talk to us, right? Talk to a wealth advisor, talk to us at TBH Group. We can walk you through the different scenarios and the different options and how to protect yourself, right? Because I will guarantee you that CRA was quite happy collecting a check for $660,000 to spend on whatever they thought was, appropriate. And I've seen some of their spending, and I would have been ticked off if that was my money being spent on certain things.
Well, it's not just a wealth advisor, but also independent. I think it's very important to talk about the independent piece because, we're not tied to any one particular solution or result. We're trying to create a perfect strategy, ideally for the people that we're working with, right? And it allows us to move between different insurance and banking institutions to find and kind of put the best Tetris together for each individual for their best outcome. And I think it's important to mention that because, yes, you can't avoid taxes, although I'm pretty sure there's people out there that avoid them quite often, which gets them in trouble. But it's about finding ways to help reduce the amount of tax because a lot of people aren't taking advantage of working with an advisor, doing the proper planning, working in a team set like ourselves and being able to bring in your accountant, have a conversation. We understand what this goal is this year, but we're also trying to achieve a goal 10 years when retirement happens and also once the legacy piece kicks in. And what does that look like? And that's where an independent advisor will really start showing the value for a lot of clients that they don't even realize yet. So,
yeah. So that note, if you're looking for one, give us a call. look for us at tvhgroup.ca. You'll see the different professionals that are within the group. So we have our mortgage broker, we have our accountant, who knows better than to just suggest RSPs all the time, lawyer, right, to help you with the wills and estate planning. We have ourselves as wealth advisors. We have our in-house portfolio manager. We have our private wealth advisor, right? We have everything. And if there's a service that we don't offer, I'll guarantee you within our network of people, we have a trusted professional that we can refer you to. So, you know what? We'll just leave it at that for now. And until the next time, if you want to save money and you don't want to pay all those taxes, just give us a call, please.
Yep.
Alrighty. You take care.
Take care.